So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Cattani, and I'm joined today by Greg Dickerson. Greg is a serial entrepreneur, real estate developer, coach, and mentor. He has bought, developed, and sold over $250 million in real estate, built and renovated hundreds of custom homes and commercial buildings, developed residential and mixed-use subdivision, and started 12 companies from the ground up. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were talking offline, obviously a really solid career thus far, but let's kind of go back to the beginning. You know, how did it all start and kind of what led to here?
Yeah. Long story short, natural born entrepreneur. As a little kid, 8, 9, 10 years old. I was the guy knocking on doors, raking grass, cutting yards, washing cars, whatever it took to make a buck. My dad wouldn't give me any money. He said, if you want to make money, you need to go figure out how to get it. Or if you want something, you need to figure out how to go get the money to get it. And then he would charge me for using his equipment. So I learned the cost of doing business at a very young age. And, of course I was, had no qualms about cold calling, knocking on doors, digging up work. So I'm kind of wired that way as a natural born entrepreneur. Fast forward, I graduated high school, went in the Navy. Right out of high school, I did not go to college. I did retail in the Navy. So I got some business training there. After the Navy, I did two things, restaurants and construction. So I always had a little side business in construction. And while I was working in and managing restaurants, and I got really good business education and training from the restaurant industry, learning how to manage people, how to use, build, and operate systems, how to run the numbers. The restaurant business is all about squeezing a nickel out of a penny. Watching all of your controls, your costs, things like that, budgeting, scheduling. So that was a very extremely valuable education, and more than anything else, learning how to lead, delegate, motivate, recruit, hire, train, and use systems in your business so that everything runs without you. Restaurants it's systemized, automated business. So that was really good training that equated well into the restaurant industry. So fast forward 1997, after working in a corporate environment in restaurants for a little while, having a side business in construction, and after the Navy. So that was 1985 to 89 was the military. And then 89 to 97 was working, in restaurants while having a side business in construction. And in 1997, I moved to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. That's where the Wright brothers took off, where Flight originated. And I moved there to open some restaurants, but instead I got into construction. I started a little remodeling handyman company in 1997, built that into a $30 million building development company in 7 years, started 12 other companies along the way. At the same time, built them all up and sold them off. And I used all the profits to reinvest in those other projects that you talked about in the beginning. So that 250 million, that was me, my own money, my own cash, no investors. That was just my own projects. I've done, several hundred million other projects and companies with investor capital, but that was just my own capital that I used by building businesses, reinvesting that cash into development deals and investment properties. And, so that's my long story short. And here we are, 25 years later. And, now I'm teaching, coaching, and mentoring people all over the world. And all over the country, doing all kinds of things, teaching them how to do development, how to do value add. I've got some companies I'm working with that are growing and scaling their businesses, all kinds of different businesses. So it's a lot of fun. I'm at the point in my life where I'm giving back and impacting others and helping them impact their world through what I teach them. So it's a lot of fun.
Wow, awesome. That's a really great story, an incredible career you've had so far, and that's great that now you're giving back, which really is what I love about this industry, and not just, real estate, but the entrepreneur industry, or whatever you want to call entrepreneurship. Everyone eventually gives back, right? They do their thing, build their career, and then turn around and start coaching. And I love that so much, because you can just find help, and it's so important. And I definitely want to get into why coaching and mentoring is important. But one thing I want to touch on, you're really big into restaurants, just pure curiosity. Restaurants take a while to really get going. Is that true? It's kind of a tough industry to grow a business.
Yeah, yeah, it's very different now. So back when I was in it, you gotta remember this was 1980, 84, 85. So, back then there were a lot fewer, so a lot less competition. There was plenty of employees. So it was a whole different environment and ball game back when I was in the industry. But still, it's a very high energy industry. It's a very low margin business. You have to really watch your cost, your controls. You have to really, be able to efficiently and effectively manage people. You have to be able to, use and implement systems. So a couple of ways, obviously there were franchises back then that you could buy into, and then there were the corporate restaurant entities, and a lot of the ones that I work for aren't even around anymore. So it's an evolving, changing, fickle business. And today, and in today's world, people, the way they live and do things, it's very different. Back when I was in the industry, people didn't eat out every day. They didn't do takeout. There wasn't food options at every grocery store, hot food, ready food, grab and go. You didn't have all those options, gas stations, convenience stores, all that like you do today. So there's a lot of competition for that dining dollar. So it's a very difficult business, right now to make work, especially with the pressure on the job market. Labor is through the roof right now for restaurants. So your two biggest costs is your labor and your food cost. That's your prime cost. That represents generally about 60% of the cost of operating a restaurant. Then your rent, taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance, all that other stuff is on top of that. So at the end of the day, I mean, a very good profitable restaurant can make about 20%. You got to do a lot of work, and there's a lot of hustling and a lot of pressure and a lot of stuff you got to go through to make 20% in a restaurant. So, but I love it when you do it. It becomes part of you. It gets in your blood, and I did it for a long time, and I really loved it and enjoyed it. And, I had some restaurants of my own, very, very successful, and built them up, sold them off, and things like that. But these days, it's a very difficult business and very hard to make money, especially right now, because costs are just all over the map right now.
Yeah, I know everything's kind of bottlenecked and kind of feeling that effect, and we got inflation, all that stuff. But really, like you said, when you get those systems dialed, obviously things run smooth. And man, does that equate into every other business, right? And being able to coach that for any other style of business is so huge, because I know, like people say I'm in real estate, but that's not really true. Really, I'm in like finance and economics, you know what I mean? Because ultimately, sure, you go acquire a property, but that's when the work starts. And now you have to run a business. And so having those systems and understanding the costs and all of that, just transfers so well.
It does. And the key that you just hit on is, real estate is all about the finance. Without the financing, there is no deal, whether it's cash or, traditional financing or, other alternative types of financing. You've got to pay for the deal. And then the different types of real estate and the different, classes of real estate have their own little business components to them, in terms of like self-storage. You're mentioning you're doing a ground up self-storage. That's a retail business inside of real estate. That's an operating entity that you have to operate. Whereas, multifamily property, you can just third party out the management, and basically all you're paying is the mortgage and the taxes, and the third party management handles everything else. So there's no business really to operate there, but you have a business of raising capital. If you don't have the funds yourself and you have to raise capital, well, that's a business that has to be managed in terms of investor relations and all these other different things. And then you have the hotel industry, which is hospitality inside of real estate. So that's almost operating like a restaurant, type of business, mixed with, kind of a multifamily component, but your rates are changing daily. So that's a whole nother business model. Short-term rentals, where I grew up, that was the industry I started in, were vacation homes. I was building and developing, short-term rental properties, vacation properties. And, that's a business, depending on how you want to operate that. I use third-party management, so I didn't run them, but it was a business of, raising the money or using my own capital, getting the financing, building the properties. That was a whole separate deal. So yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of people think real estate's passive. Really depends on what you're doing and at what level.
Absolutely. And even the best passive investors will, not necessarily classify themselves as active, but if you're doing it correctly, there's still work, right? You need to make sure you're doing your due diligence and vetting your operators and things like that. So, there's definitely some operational side of even being a passive investor. But you obviously are big in development, and that's one thing I definitely want to get on. You kind of mentioned, potentially working on a ground up deal here in Salt Lake. So kind of talk about, what development, you're coaching and how you coach people on development, what that kind of looks like, and kind of the keys to, you know, doing a successful development deal.
Yeah. So I have a couple of things. I have online digital courses that, people can purchase and then, go through the course. And one of them is on real estate development. And, it teaches you all the basics of how to become a real estate developer. So what I teach is very different than anything else. You can go to school and get a degree in real estate development, but they don't teach you how to be a developer, how to be an entrepreneur. So that's what I teach people how to do. It's a school of entrepreneurship. So that's my program. So I teach people how to be entrepreneurs, how to be leaders, delegators, motivators. So when it comes to real estate development, first and foremost, what's exciting about it is you got to be a visionary. Number one, you have to be able to have a vision for a property and be able to unlock its highest and best use and maximize that property, especially in today's world, because it's risky, it's expensive, all that kind of stuff. So you want to be able to understand how to maximize a property. So it's creative in terms of, different types of properties and how to get the most density out of that property and the highest and best use for that property, and be able to understand and identify that. And anywhere in the country and in the world, having that skill where I can go anywhere in the world and identify a parcel and understand its highest and best use and how to maximize that density for that use. So that's a skill that you develop. So I teach that. And then understanding the risks, so what is risk? Risk is preservation of capital. You don't want to lose any money, right? So where the number one mistake people make is, first of all, they don't understand the risk. The second thing is they don't understand how to accurately calculate that risk. And number three, they can't withstand the hit when that risk happens. So that's where people get taken out in real estate development. That's why people think it's so risky. But if you know those things and you understand how to accurately calculate those things, and more importantly, be able to handle the hit when it comes, then you're fine. And there really is no risk. So once you know what you're doing, that's how you mitigate risk, is by understanding the business, knowing the pitfalls, knowing where the potholes are, and having a team of professionals that you've surrounded yourself with that know the business, have been in it forever, and you learn from them and you lead, delegate, motivate, guide them to the end result. So at the end of the day, and then add the financial component, like you said, to it, being able to be a fundraiser and bring the resources, the financial resources to fulfill the vision. That's what's so fun and exciting and creative about the whole process. So that's what I teach people how to do.
Awesome. I love that. And you touched on a lot of really great points. I kind of want to start at the beginning. You obviously mentioned that you're able now to go anywhere in the world and kind of identify what are some key indicators that you look for that, help you recognize when, oh, this would be a great spot for multifamily or mixed use or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So we'll take utilities and zoning and all that out of the equation. So just highest and best use is what you're talking about.
Right.
So when you're looking at a parcel of land anywhere in the world, you need to understand the demographics. Okay. What surrounds that property? What do the demographics look like? What are the other uses around that property? What is going to best, service the needs of the demographics in the community around that property? And what are those services, needs, and necessities that are missing, or what can you bring that will add value to that demographic? Because it's all about people at the end of the day, and real estate is hyper local, meaning, it's all about the street, the city, the street, the block, the position on that, on that street. So you got to drill down that deep and just understand, where are the gaps in the market? What are the demand drivers? If you want to build a hotel, there's got to be a reason people want to come to that area to stay in a hotel. You can have the best piece of real estate in the best city in the world, but if there's nothing for people to come see, they're not going to come stay in a hotel. So there's got to be museums and, theater and amusement parks, or, hiking or something, for people to want to come to that area to see. Same thing with a restaurant. Okay. So, if you want to have a restaurant on a parcel, or if you think the community needs a restaurant, what's the competition look like? How many restaurants are in, in a 5-mile radius? What do they serve? What's their price point? Who's their customer? How often do the people go? That kind of thing. Do those people even eat out? Or, what's their income base? Understanding traffic counts, things like that. If you have a business that's destination bound, where people, like a doctor or, a professional service, people are going to find you online and go to your building. But, if you're impulse driven, people walk by, see something in the window and walk in, you want to be in a spot where you're maximizing foot traffic, and that type of thing. That, Starbucks across from a Starbucks, right? There's enough foot traffic to serve both. So, those are the things that you look at, and it really can be that simple. anywhere in the world, but you need to understand and know how to find those things out and be, diligent and tenacious enough to reach out, talk to people, do the research, and figure out what's needed, and not just assume that I have this great idea to build a boutique hotel so I can put that anywhere. It doesn't work that way. You got to find out, what does the community need? What are they missing, that you can serve them? Because at the end of the day, it's all about service, right? We're here to serve as real estate developers, as investors, entrepreneurs. We're trying to solve problems. The biggest opportunity comes from solving the biggest problems. You want to identify the gaps in the market, the problems you can solve, the needs of the community, and then go serve that.
Okay, awesome. That was a really great explanation. Makes perfect sense as well, especially, and I feel like, is some of the like commercial real estate, like multifamily, for instance, like, is that one of, you kind of brought up hotels and restaurants, but is multifamily one of those ones where it's a little more cut and dry, or is it still kind of the same process?
Yeah, it's the same process, especially depending on the country you're in and how that works and operates. The other component is, zoning is important. What does the community zoning boards and officials, what do they want? What's their comprehensive plan and vision for the area? Because it's got to fit within all that as well. So that's really the first place you start, is what you're doing, even something they're going to welcome, or are they going to fight you? And you don't want to fight battles that aren't worth fighting, right? We only have so much time on this planet. But multifamily is different. So, that goes back to core services. So what's the demand? If there's, tons of vacancy in the market, then, it may not be a great use for a multifamily. If there's zero vacancy in the market and waiting lists, then you can build almost anything and you'll be full. And, maybe there are vacancies, but there's not the right kind of properties, or something like that. So you got to look for the gaps again in the market. But the number one thing people need is a roof over their head. So that's why multifamily is so popular right now, because people need a place to stay. Housing is expensive. It's not easy for everybody to get a loan because you have to put a down payment down, versus other times in the past. So, renting is becoming more popular for a lot of people. And, the younger demographic, the millennials, and, whatever it is before the millennials, those are the biggest, segment of the population right now that are aging and need housing, so there's a lot of renters in the pipeline, and a lot of the, older generation is kind of aging out and, stepping down and, going into other types of facilities, or, doing whatever. And then you have areas of the country and areas of the world where the population's going. So there's more housing that's needed in those areas. Right now, the Sun Belt's on fire, over the last couple of years because of the pandemic. So those areas, have limited amount of rental units for people. And, so yeah, same type of thing when you're looking at multifamily.
Okay, awesome. That makes perfect sense. And you kind of touched on it earlier, some risks involved, obviously, and making sure you mitigate those and are prepared for them. So kind of touch on some of those risks. Right now, obviously, labor and material costs are kind of like ebb and flowing like crazy. So kind of touch on some of the risks and how you can, work those in, the fluctuating costs into underwriting and things like that.
Yeah. So right now it's just the wild, wild west, right? Labor and material, constraints and costs are just escalating, and they're kind of out of your control. So you can't really mitigate that. You just need to make sure you got enough room in your deal. I mean, that's really how you mitigate it. You have a contingency clause, contingency in your budget, generally 10% right now, because your costs can escalate that much depending on what phase of construction you're in. So right now, you just need to make sure you've got enough room, in your project, that if it escalates 10 or 20%, you're going to be okay. Again, understanding the risk, accurately calculating it, and being able to withstand that hit when it happens, because it's going to happen, somewhere along the line. So that's a big one that you just can't control right now, that you used to be able to control 3 years ago. Costs are just wherever they are. Stuff is going to cost you what it costs to get it here. Labor is going to cost you what it costs to get them to show up sometimes. And, but that will come back around. I've seen it before. I've been in this business since, 1997. And I've seen, well, actually 1990, doing my own side business. And I've seen the peaks and valleys in construction. It's feast or famine business. That'll change. Your other risk is regulatory environment. Anything can and will happen from a code standpoint as you're in process. Code inspector can come in and say, hey, I want you to add sprinklers to this building. And, you didn't have to have it before, but now they've changed something and you got to have it. Well, that can add, a significant amount of money. Or they could make you change your parking, along the way. So there's zoning risk until you get that project done and CO'd. There's risk of a zoning impact along the way. subsurface conditions. You can test, but you can't account for every square inch of a site. You never know what you might encounter when you start excavating and digging. There's just injury, risk of theft and, fire damage, wind. I've seen buildings in process get blown over during construction because of a big windstorm that whips up out of nowhere. When you're in the middle of working on a building, all of a sudden you just get this huge windstorm that comes through and just knocks all the walls back down. So, there's just all kinds of things that can and will happen. And the only way you can mitigate is to, again, have room in your budget, be prepared for anything and everything, because it does and will happen, and have insurance and have the proper insurance. And then qualified professionals that have been doing, what it is they're doing for a number of years in the business, so that they can execute, that they're sound, financially and technically and, efficiently, and they can get the job done.
Okay, awesome. That was a lot of really, really great points. So now kind of touch on, obviously, a lot of risk involved, which can, like you mentioned, scares a lot of people away. A lot of people just want to wait, either take on, value add, that kind of thing. But now kind of talk about some of the upside and why, development is still a very popular, aspect of the industry.
Yeah. So generally you have way more margin, in your development projects than you do in a finished, value add or opportunistic situation. Actually, opportunistic can be, extremely good and have high margin as well. That's where you take an existing use and redo it, adaptive reuse or something like that, or tear something down. But generally you have more margin, right up front. As soon as it's done, it's generally going to be worth 20, 30, 50 to 100% more, depending on what your basis of your land is, because you can get really good deals on land. And it's the whole replacement cost thing. So, inventory levels are down right now. There's not very many assets for sale, whether it's housing or whether it's, multifamily or storage or whatever. There just aren't many that are for sale. And the ones that are for sale, are trading at unreal cap rates and unreal values right now, over the last couple of years. So it's cheaper to develop right now, other than the issues we're having in the supply chain lately and with labor lately. But even 2 years ago, it was way cheaper to build than buy. And it still kind of is right now. And then you have that margin at the back end. So, generally that's how it works. But there are times when it's cheaper to buy than build. That's what we went through in 2008 and 9. That was the last time that the equation was flipped, where there was so much, vacancy and foreclosures and things like that. It didn't make any sense to build. A lot of people left the industry. That's why we got behind in housing and some of these other assets, because the development community contracted and there just wasn't a lot being done. And now we've started to ramp it back up. Now we've got more development in the pipeline than we've seen in years. So that cycle's, it's turning over again.
Okay, that makes perfect sense of why, because it was right around about 2010 when that supply really constricted, and that explains it. Then developers just basically left because it was so much cheaper to just buy. So now let's kind of talk about it from an investor standpoint. What does it look like?
And the financing dried up. That was another big equation. Back in 08, 09, you couldn't get financing for your deals. It was very difficult.
Especially construction.
Yeah.
So now let's look at it from an investor standpoint. What does it look like in terms of setting the expectation on a development deal for investors, and, making sure they understand that, you're not going to get paid right away. There's, a lot of variables at play, and kind of setting that up.
Yeah, that's just explaining that and communicating and, understanding your investor pool. There's some people, generally development deals pay higher yields than a value add deal. So sometimes you have to offer a little bit more because there is a different, component and element to risk. And you just need to make sure your investors understand what they're signing up for. And even though they don't get paid up front, they're, are going to accrue, their, the interest, that they're earning on the project, or, their equity in the deal is just going to accrue their returns. So you just need to make sure that they understand that you have the right investor for the right deal, and that they're patient. And you have patient capital. Same thing in value add. You need to make sure those investors understand what the deal is and how it works, when they're going to get their money back, when capital is going to be returned, and how, and those types of things. So as long as you communicate that up front, you're in good shape.
I love that. Full transparency. That's the key. No matter what, really, honestly, you want to always be transparent with your investors. So now let's kind of switch gears. Let's get into, obviously your big thing now is coaching and mentoring. So kind of talk about why that's so important for any industry, and, what you really focus on in your coaching classes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I was my whole career. So, I built businesses and companies, by coaching others. So I didn't do it after my first initial, 2 or 3 years, when I was literally was me, my truck and tools. When I started out swinging a hammer, doing whatever. And then I started hiring people. Once I stepped out of the day to day of doing it myself, I became a leader, delegator, motivator, and I coached others. In the restaurants, it was the same way. I had people that I was leading, managing, and coaching. So as a leader, as a developer, as an investor, buying buildings, you're leading everybody, right? You're leading your investors, you're leading your partners, you're leading your property management companies, you're leading your lenders. You have to give them what they need. Leadership is serving others. It's leadership from the bottom up. So instead of this pyramid here where the CEO or the partners or whatever at the top and everybody else is down, that pyramid is flipped upside down. So the leaders at the bottom, the CEOs at the bottom, giving everybody what they need, up the chain to be successful. Tools, training, systems, and support, but more importantly, that clear direction and no uncertain terms, exactly what's expected and when at every level, and then measuring that performance and holding it accountable to the goals. So that's really, in a nutshell, how you build a business and what you have to be a developer, to be an investor. You got to lead everybody on the team to the end result, to the goal. So it's kind of how I was wired. And the way I learned, I didn't go to college, I didn't have that formal education. I learned on the job by hiring, the right people, my subcontractors. I didn't know how to build a house before I built a house. I didn't know how to, build an addition before I did it. I learned from the people that I was hiring. And then when I hired employees, I went and found the best people in the business doing what I wanted to do, that had been in that community, building multi-million-dollar beach houses for 10 years before I ever got there. And I recruited, hired, and trained them to run the business for me. And what I did was I coached them and I provided them with what they needed to be successful: tools, training, systems, and support. If they said, hey, we need this to go build, I said, I want to do 30 of these this year. What do you need? We need this person here. We need that system there. We need this truck, whatever it was. I gave them what they needed and I coached them to success and learned from them. And, I had no idea, I didn't know anything about cash flows or financials or anything like that at an advanced level in terms of, the deals that I was funding. So I hired an MBA, who was my chief financial officer, to, teach me and to help negotiate with the banks and the lenders. And that was his job. And so I learned from him. So the people that I hired were educated. They all had college degrees. They were all highly educated and they were very good at what they did. And I learned from them. So they were my mentors. I was paying them as employees, but they were really my mentors. And then I had clients. So this was the biggest education and the biggest light bulb for me was when I started understanding how to become an investor and developer. I didn't even know that was a thing before I started working for a couple of guys who were, one of them was a vice president of Citibank. And the other one, I can't remember what he did. He was another banking guy, like hedge fund or investor or something. They had hundreds of millions of dollars and they were coming down and buying beach houses. They were hiring me to do the work on them. So I kind of, was watching them. They were buying, $1 million oceanfront properties and putting 300,000-400,000 in them and, selling them for $3 million, right? And I was like, man, I want to do what you're doing. And they're like, well, watch and learn, and here's how you do it. So I started learning by doing projects for them. And then eventually I proved myself and they would bring me in a deal. So I started working for other developers, other investors that were doing deals, developing subdivisions and stuff like that. I had a general contracting company, so I'd come in and do the work for them at cost in exchange for equity in the deal. And I learned, from them. Not that that was a value to them, but they wanted to see that I was worth investing in. So I had to, pay. I had to do something. They didn't need me to contribute my equity as a builder. They allowed me to do that to show them I was worthy of their time and teaching me. So they taught me how to be developers and, how to be a developer and how to raise capital and all that. So I learned by hiring people and listening to them and asking good questions. And I learned by working with and for other more sophisticated investors and developers, doing what I wanted to do and asking good questions and learning from them and humbling myself and realizing I don't know anything. And the more I learned, the more I realized I do not know, especially in the world of finance and doing deals. It was pretty incredible. So, that's my long story short and how I was able to fast track and do so much in such a short period of time for a guy like me that came from like nothing. I had no entrepreneurs in my family. I had no money, no resources, no assets. I literally financed my first company on credit cards and, the money that I was bringing in from jobs. That was it. I could not get a bank loan.
Wow. That's incredible. And that's so, I mean, you hit so many really great points there, right? Really hiring people, empowering them, which is such a huge component, right? Give, like you said, what do you need? What do you need? I'll get it for you. And then watching, learning. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs real quick on, let's say they're kind of at that point where they're starting to decide to scale, what advice do you have in terms of like what they should focus on and then hiring the rest out, kind of figuring that
So
process?
the first thing is you got to put your ego aside and you just got to understand you don't know anything. I don't care how much you think you don't know anything. So you need to go find the people that do know, and you need to bring them in and let them do their thing and let them teach you and humble yourself to that. A lot of people get threatened by their own employees. It's ridiculous. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to what you said about what you need to be focusing on, we all have our talents. So you need to understand your limitations. So that's the other thing. Get rid of your ego, understand your limitations, and realize that, again, you don't know anything. And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And you want to put those pieces in place that build on your weaknesses, not your strengths. So you have your strength, you focus on that. And whatever you're weak at, that's what you hire out. That's what you delegate out. That's what you outsource. You focus 100% on your sweet spot. If raising capital is your sweet spot, forget about operations. You go raise capital, hire somebody to operate or partner with somebody to operate. If you're operations bent, hire somebody to do the rest and you focus on operations. So as that leader, you need to understand, that's the other most important thing about finding the right people is you got to put the right people in the right seat. So, I use the Tom Brady analogy. Tampa Bay wanted a Super Bowl, right? What did they do? They went and they got the best quarterback they could find in the history of football. They paid him whatever he wanted. They brought him in and they said, take us to a Super Bowl. Do you think they came in and told Tom Brady how to get to the Super Bowl? Do you think they told him what he should be doing and what route he should, or what he should be throwing or whatever? No, they came in and said, Tom, we want to go to the Super Bowl. You get us there. So he brought Gronkowski in and he built that team and got him to a Super Bowl the first year and won it, so that's how you do it. So I always use that analogy because that's the easiest thing to remember. If you want to get to the Super Bowl or if you want to get to the NCAA championships, whatever it is, you bring the best people in you can find and you let them do their thing because that's what they do. And you put the right people in the right seats, aces in places. You don't take a quarterback and put him at wide receiver. You don't take a fullback and put him at, running kickoffs. What I mean?
Right.
You got to put the right people in the right place and you got to let them do their thing.
Gosh, that's so key and such a huge component of, building and scaling successfully and, being nimble, right, is making sure those people in the right place and doing what they're supposed to. So this has been incredible. I really appreciate all of this. And I know the listeners do as well, but we're nearing the end. So I have 5 questions that I ask all of my guests. It's the final 5. First question is, what's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Continuing to educate yourself and develop yourself. Never stop learning.
Oh, I love that. So important. You said it multiple times, but it's so true. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah,
such
it's
a
pretty
fascinating
amazing.
concept.
And the biggest thing you don't know is how far you can really go. Most people just don't realize what they can really do. I didn't know back then how far I could really go. And, if I knew back then now that you're really unlimited, within your, God-given talents, we all have our physical limitations. I'm not going to go through touchdowns for Tampa Bay, but there's nothing stopping me from doing any deal I want to do at any level. Not one thing.
Awesome. I love that. That's so huge.
Except the knowledge. You got to know how to do it.
Yep. That's true. And if you don't, then just find someone who does. So what is it about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
Impacting other people, helping other people reach their goals. I get more of a kick out of helping other people be successful and reach their goals than any deal I've ever done. And I've built a lot of companies. I've done a lot of deals. What tickles me more than anything else is watching people understand their God-given potential, what they were put on this earth to do, and helping them unlock it and reach that full potential. That's what I love to do.
Oh, I love that so much. What's your favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
Non-real estate or investment related, probably How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Love that. Throwback, but always
other
still
than the Bible. And, the Bible obviously is a great book. Proverbs is my favorite book in the Bible in terms of, that's got all kinds of business wisdom in there. But yeah, How to Win Friends and Influence People is a good one because it's all about relationships.
Right. And that's all this business really comes down to. That's Dale Carnegie, right?
Dale Carnegie, yeah. You have to be able to effectively communicate, whether it's your vision, whatever. That's the key. That's the key to success in business.
I love it. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
If I could have any superpower, what would it be? Man, I hadn't really even thought about that. I guess to be able to retain every single bit of information, that I ever come across.
Gosh, that would be sweet. That really would. Awesome. And last one, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you and to learn more?
Yeah, gregdickerson.com. That is where all of my information is. I've got a YouTube channel, podcast, all kinds of stuff. My courses, everything is there at gregdickerson.com.
Awesome. We will link down in the show notes. Greg, thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it was great chatting with you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.